Luke seems to be saying that this is an overarching argument to the greater narrative that gives meaning to the whole. How can what Christ did while he was on earth, how is it, knowing the story of Peter and Paul and the missionary journeys, it is a narrative, but how does it fit into the whole narrative, and how is it important to me? So the chronological dimension of that story, as in any story that is well told, is obvious. Luke and Acts begins by grounding Jesus in the genealogy that goes back to Adam. Then Luke tells the story of the birth and the ministry and the death and the resurrection and the ascension of Christ. In order to move into his second volume, to continued work of Jesus through the Spirit in the life of the church. So he moves, in the book of Acts, he moves the ministry of Jesus, not in flesh, but in spirit, and the Spirit moves into the church, and Christ is found in the Spirit in the church. You remember the disciples said, "We don't want you to leave. We want you to stay." And you remember Jesus says, "If I don't go to be with my Father, then I cannot send the Spirit back. Rather than just being one person at a time, now I'll send the Spirit into all believers, and he will be in all believers." And then when we come to the book of Acts, we see that the narrative moves on to Antioch. It moves on to Asia Minor. It moves into Greece. And eventually it goes into Rome. So the narrative keeps moving from one place to another place to another place. And you'll notice that the chronological and the geographic history is left unfinished. Boy, don't you hate to... You know, the worst thing that happens to me, my wife loves to read. And we're on a trip, and she reads, and she starts from the very first, and she gets to chapter 12, and the vacation is over, and the book is over. I never hear the last 14 chapters. I'm left hanging. It's unfinished. I still got things in my mind from the last 3 vacations of 3 books that my wife has read, and I still, to this day, don't know how it finished. Don't that just bug you?
That happens.
Notice that there's some unfinished business in the book of Luke and Acts.
Right.
Paul was under house arrest in Rome. I remember when I preached through Acts, when I got to the last chapter, I was said, does it have to quit here? What happened next? And we're told nothing about the final outcome of Paul standing before Caesar. Did he die or did he not die? In Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, the promise was the disciples that they would be witnesses to the end of the earth. But you'll notice that the narrative takes place and stops at Rome. Hardly the end of the world. And there we're left with no hint how the promise was fulfilled after that. When you like, there should have been volume 3. Have you ever had novels and it got to volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and when you got into volume 3, you said, man, I wish there was a volume 4. Man, it would be great to have a sequel to that one. And I wish there was another volume after the book of Acts. When we get to the end of Acts, Paul is in Rome, and we get so engrossed and we are sad that the story ends there. We are left hanging, waiting for the next stage in history. I never did like cliffhangers. They discovered how to get you back for the next season. Next season was to have a cliffhanger. I think the very first one was Dallas. I never watched Dallas, but did JR die or not? He got shot, and the bums left us all for the whole summer to wonder whether or not JR got killed.
That's true.
Yeah. Remember that? Now, NCSI, if that happened, I would be warning. I couldn't wait for the season to start. You know how that is? I couldn't wait for the next sequel, the next narrative that took place. Sort of like 24. You wanted the next sequel to come happen. We're left. Why? I really don't know why we have this. But I believe that Luke and Acts is called the unfinished gospel. I remember when I taught Acts, I said, this is an unfinished gospel. It hasn't finished yet. Maybe, just maybe, Luke was not only seeking to give us information about history, but perhaps Luke was inviting us to be a part of that history. The history has not been finished yet. And maybe Luke is telling us, why don't you help fulfill history? We're going to learn the story of Jesus and the early church. But we're going to be invited to see ourselves in the continuum of that story and to become witnesses to the end of the earth. God wants the gospel to go to the ends of the earth, and maybe there's still some places in the world that God wants the gospel to be, and maybe He wants us, Christians, to go to that part of the world. Did you know there are parts of the world that Christianity hasn't got there yet? And God wants every nation, every tribe, every people to hear the gospel. And maybe that work after 2,000 years is still not been completed yet. Maybe history hasn't been fulfilled yet. So the grand narrative, therefore, is an invitation, a reminder to the readers who they are. And within that grand narrative, the various smaller narratives. And when you're reading a novel, there's about 3 or 4 different narratives going on at the same time, right? Trying to keep everything straight is interesting. Luke is in his writing with the Holy Spirit as Luke guides. And as the Word of God is a living, every present day, even at the present day, Luke is very close to our own interest in history in 2012. So the question is, did Luke in his narrative bring up some things that's very close to 2012? We study and write history to be a part of it. Those who see hope in the present use history to invite others to hope. Those who would see doom are invited to fear. Those who seek guidance and corrections are invited to follow the guidance and correct history. We don't want history to repeat itself. We've often said that we don't want history to repeat itself. We are a part of an ongoing history. It's unfinished. And there is an invitation to join what God is doing among us. I've said many times, I want to know what God is doing in history. I want to know what God is doing right here in this place. I would like to see God's map plan, His blueprint, what He really would like to see Rivers of Joy Baptist Church to be doing a year from now. Is He working out a plan in our lives, and we're taking it one step at a time, and the narrative has been written, and I want to be a part of what God is doing. I sure hate to get to heaven and find out I totally misread what God was trying to do. But as a footnote, and there is a counterpoint to this, this unfinished history is not simply up for grabs. Its end has already been written. It has been written in the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ and in His final reign. History has already been written. And history will be fulfilled. It's between this point and this point that God is moving in history. We're moving to the end of history, and God is accomplishing something in that history, and I want to be a part. I want to be a part of being part of what God is doing to bring about history that's going to last forever. We don't live an unpurposed life. And because the end has been written, Luke invites us today to join in his grand narrative that begins in his gospel and continues to Acts and is leading to us. Let's look at the particular interest that I've seen in the book of Acts. There seems to be some grand reversals on the part of the writing of the book of Luke. In a world where, when we look at Luke, we are in a world where you would expect, if you live in Rome, you would expect that life should be like Rome. When you live in Rome, live like the Romans. Luke tells us a story that begins in Galilee, not in Rome. And in Rome, the Jews and the Romans are living together, and he moves on to bring its message and its power, first in Jerusalem, and then he goes to Rome. So within this context, Luke starts out his history not by going to Rome and telling us about the political Rome government. He doesn't tell us about what is happening in Rome. He doesn't tell us about the political aspect of Rome. But he starts out by going to Galilee. I want you to notice that some very interesting things that happen. Mary announces this at the very beginning of the gospel. We notice that a lot of things take place in this narrative that is very interesting. If you notice reversals, there's a lot of reversals in the book of Luke that was not really happening in that day. You know, Dr. Quinn, the medicine man, the medicine woman, you remember that show?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things in that show that's wrong.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen. There is a reversal of concept in that movie. What they did is they tried to put today's concept back in that day. It was totally wrong.
Right.
Reversal is a theme of some of the most classic Christian stories. I'm sure most of us have read Cinderella. And most of us have read The Ugly Duckling and hope that we were both. There is much in those stories that are wrong. The notions that a girl's highest purpose in life is to marry a prince, that physical beauty is to be valued above all, that women do not love their stepchildren are wrong.